Good morning and welcome to CoreTech's webinar on shared values. I'm Michelle Burton. I am the principal owner at CoreTech Revolution. We have been in business doing healthcare technology consulting for 15 years, and so we're very excited to be branching out into webinar series and sharing our knowledge and experience with you. Jane Niederberger is going to be leading today's webinar. She is an experienced healthcare technology executive with over 30 years of experience. And Jane has been working with CoreTech for the last several years as our partner in strategic operations and helping bring healthcare organizations to the next level. Today, Jane is going to be sharing with you the second webinar in a four-part series that shares a story about goals, values, trust, and building a strong team. Today's focus is going to be on shared values. So Jane, the floor is yours.
Good morning. We are talking about shared values today, and values can be hard. It's important to know both the explicit and implicit values in your organization. And then how to communicate and reinforce them. We all know the right thing isn't always the easy thing to do. And so by having explicit guidelines and rules and support systems in an organization can make or break the way you want your company to run, the way you want your employees to behave, and the way you want your customers to perceive you. So the focus today is really on corporate values. Personal values is a big topic too, but that was just too much to cover in this one session. That being said, personal values and corporate values can't be in conflict or you'll be unhappy. And I'm sure each of us can think of at least a situation where you had to make some hard calls about, do I stay working here? Do I do this? Can I look at myself in the mirror in the morning if I move forward with doing X, Y, and Z? So keeping that balance is important, and more on that later. The definition of core values are all over the place, depending upon business dictionaries, Wikipedia. It's really about the fundamental beliefs, concepts, and principles that guide decisions and behaviors in an organization. They really boil down to the behaviors and rules that dictate how a company and individuals in that company respond to certain situations. We have all heard the expression, integrity is doing the right thing when no one is looking. This is a value that's ingrained in certain people. They'll always do the right thing. And corporate values are very similar, and that if you communicate them and if we reinforce them in the right way, our teams will know exactly how to behave. They won't have to think about it. And that's really important to have a healthy, thriving organization. We start, though, with the mission statement. The mission statement defines the company's goals, usually in three important ways: what the company does for its customers, what it does for its employees, what it does for its owners. Sometimes, if it's an overarching big company or a company with grand ideas, and I do not mean that sarcastically, they will include dimensions around what it does for the community and what it does for the world. It tackles what's the purpose of your organization? Why do you exist? And how do we achieve this purpose? If you look at companies like Amazon, we all know Amazon. Amazon is guided by four principles in its mission statement: customer obsession rather than competitor focus, passion for invention, commitment to operational excellence, and long-term thinking. That's clear to its employees and customers, what's important to Amazon, I think. If you look at Warby Parker, the eyeglass company, their mission statements sums it up nicely too. They say to offer designer eyewear at a revolutionary price while leading the way for socially conscious businesses. So again, you know what they're doing. They don't have these big high arching about improved seeing throughout the world, or, improve healthcare for our customers. You don't want them so generic that you could almost slap them onto any company. You want something that distinguishes you in your field. And that's why I pulled out the Amazon and the Warby Parker one. And if you Google on site and you look at mission statements, you'll see really good ones, very vague ones, some that no matter how many times you read it, you still don't know what the heck they're saying. They've just thrown in a whole lot of jargon. I am on the board of Conner Prairie, which is an interactive history museum here in Indiana. And I say that with a smile in my voice because history museums aren't cool. Museums aren't cool anymore, really. And so we've always been the leaders in interactive experiences. Now, for those of you who live or are near Indiana, you'll probably say I went there in the 4th grade. Hopefully, you've been there since and you've seen the changes that the company has made. The museum has made so many changes in terms of engaging people one-on-one and letting people touch things and immerse themselves and really trying to get out of that museum mode that we had to relook at our mission statement and our values. And our mission statement is no longer be the best history museum in the country or in Indiana. It's going more along the lines of reinventing history museums and what they do for the world. It's still very much a work in progress, but you can see how when you change those words to reflect what the company wants to do and how they're going to do it, it's going to trickle down into the values as we talk about this a little bit more. The values are important because they talk about the behaviors that will achieve the mission. How do you want your organization to feel? What behaviors and actions are rewarded or should be rewarded in your organization? You have to think about what behaviors will the company value over making a quick buck. If a team member chooses to honor a core value over making a sale or saving the company some cost of goods, will they be rewarded or will they be punished? And that's where you start to sort out what the difference is in truly what the company values. If your team spends a whole bunch of time complaining about customers, is the right behavior fire customers? Is that what the company values? Or is it coming up with a better way to serve the customers or a different way? And both can be the right answers depending upon what business you're in and where you're at. An example from my Anthem days, and some of you on this call, if you're from Anthem, you can keep me honest on this one, is we were going through a time of tremendous growth, and we had some very, very large companies in the organization, and we decided that we really had an obligation to save on our operating costs, and that was so that we could keep premiums low for smaller companies. And so some of the gigantic companies really demanded a lot of service, a lot of attention, and we weren't making any money on them. They were really costing us money. And they were taking a lot of time and energy for customer service people, for claims people, and for salespeople. So we came up with a strategy of how are we going to fire some of them. But here were our new rules of operating. Just because you were so big didn't mean you got to dictate how everything was going to be for every other customer. So we came up with a strategy of how are we going to fire our customers and how are we going to treat customers in different categories. It sounds much simpler than it really was, but it was a hard thing to do. The other thing is, when and how should the success of a team be rewarded as a team, and not unfairly rewarding those who just appear to be superstars. An example of that is you may be giving fantastic service at your company, and that might be why the sales team are killing their quotas. So does the sales team only get the reward, or does the whole team? Meaning the customer service people, or the enrollment people who are getting out cards, or the infrastructure people who are doing human resources or systems. How do you balance that out? So all those come into play when you're setting up your company values and when you're communicating and reiterating them to people. So which values does your organization support? Sorry, grammatically that doesn't sound right to me. There are lots of ways to tackle values in an organization. And so I'm just going to pick a few here on this slide to talk through to give you an idea on how you can look at them in different ways. If you look at honesty and integrity and any other nouns that describe the way an organization wants to be perceived, you kind of have to think about, how does this look like on a daily basis? Is honesty to tell the truth no matter what? Even if you're hurting people's feelings, even if they don't want to hear it? What does that really mean? So the example here is CoreTech. Full disclosure, as Michelle said, I'm working with CoreTech now, but long before I went to work for CoreTech, I used to hire them when I had a really hard project that in my mind was spinning in circles. I couldn't get to the bottom of it. We weren't making enough progress. The reports were saying everything was on track. The results were not saying everything was on track, and I couldn't get my arms around it. So I'd hire CoreTech. CoreTech was known to me and is known to others in the business as telling the truth. One of the values within the organization is deliver honest messages regardless of the impact on the business and what people want to hear. Tell them what they need to hear, not necessarily what they want to hear. Don't sugarcoat it so much that the message is missed. You can soften a hard message, but execs need to hear the hard message. So I had at Indiana Health Information Exchange, we were trying to move data centers, to move interfaces, to move all kinds of technology things. We had things all over the place. And it was kind of an organized chaos, but again, we weren't making enough progress. And Michelle Burton came in as the project manager and basically said, look, if you want to get it done, you need to do X, Y, and Z. And these aren't easy decisions, and you need to set priorities. And you may not want to hear what I'm saying, but that's your reality. And lo and behold, we got the work done. So it's hard. So when you say honesty and integrity, it's not just a nice to have words, because we all like to think we're honest and we have high integrity. But how do you play that out, and how do you reward your employees for that? Another value is shareholder satisfaction. And this can be viewed very negatively or very positively. Startups are often focused on increasing shareholder value. I've worked with several startups, either as a consultant or as an employee, and sometimes as an investor. And as an investor, I want my investment increased. I'm looking at getting 3 to 7 times the payout of the money that I put in. As an employee of one of these startups, if you know that that's the expectation, that it's shareholder value and satisfaction, you're not spending time on building a huge infrastructure. You're not spending time delighting customers. You're delivering your product. You hope that they're happy, but you're really trying to build a solid company with a really strong balance sheet that's most likely going to be acquired by somebody for lots of money. very, very different viewpoint, but a very real value in a lot of startup companies. Product leadership is a value. And when you think about it, the easiest example here, it's all about the product. It's all about being the best in your space. And for a long time, and still for many people, we look at Apple as the perfect example. Anybody who's read anything about Steve Jobs in the early days of Apple, it was all about the product. How did it feel? How did it look? The rest was secondary. He didn't care about price. He didn't care about a lot of things. He cared about the product. Customer intimacy is making the customer happy no matter what. And again, Nordstrom is the example that often comes to mind here. And they do it very, very well. We were on a family vacation many years ago when my youngest daughter was still quite small. And she had a blanket she slept with every night. And she had left it in a hotel in Jackson Hole one morning. And it's bedtime, and we're now in Salt Lake City, many, many hours away. And I realized she doesn't have her blanket. So I run to Nordstrom, which was right there on the corner, and they're locking their doors. The security guard actually unlocked the door and asked me what was the problem. Was I lost? Had had something happened? Because I clearly looked like a frazzled mother, which I was, for the record. And when I explained to him that I was hoping to come in and buy a blanket for my daughter, we still had another week of vacation. I didn't know how she was going to sleep. And could he recommend another place that I could go? Well, lo and behold, he escorts me through the store and up to the children's department where the cashier is checking out. He halts her. They help me find the blanket I need, pay for the blanket. And I said, I was kind of at a loss for words. I was asking, what else can I do? I really appreciate this. And their comment was, we just wanted you to be happy. Hopefully you'll continue shopping at Nordstrom's. Have a great vacation. Thank you. Blew me away. It's something like that has never happened to me again, probably never will again. But those people, there was no resentment from the security guard, even going up to the cashier and telling her, stop logging out, stop counting your money. You've got one more sale coming through. She didn't roll her eyes. She didn't have an attitude. She didn't look at her watch to tell me I was going to make her late going home. All the things that I would expect, and we certainly see on a regular basis now. All employees there knew it was all about knowing your customers and taking care of them. And Nordstrom's got a lot of my money since then. So I'm sure you can think of other examples like that, where if it's very clear, there's no doubt in people's mind what they need to do and what they want to do going forward. And a lot of that comes from, how do you communicate the values? Values should be communicated both visually and verbally. There should be in break rooms, in foyers, in waiting rooms, some way of talking about what your values are and reminding employees. I do remember at Anthem at one point we were changing values, and everybody had a little business card size value list that you could keep in your wallets so that you would know what they were. It had the mission statement on one side and values on another. And while that sounds a little hokey, for a company that size, that was a really good way to distribute them and have it at people's fingertips. Because at the same time, you could see those values posted in conference rooms. You would talk about them at staff meetings, at regular management meetings, and so they were always present where you looked. They were the posters that have the success sayings on them, had some of the values and the behaviors that went with them. And that's been through several different companies that I've worked with. And again, I'm sure you can think of them, and you may have them at your company right now. And that's one component that is really, really important, is to have them public, have them in places where they remind everyone what the values are. I would argue, though, that that needs to be reinforced with walking the talk. If senior managers and all employees, but specifically senior managers, aren't walking the talk and living the values on a day-to-day basis, they can't expect anybody else in the company to do it. It's a hard example for me, but one that has stuck with me and will stick with me till the day I die. When I became the CIO at Anthem, we were in the process of merging 3 companies in the Midwest: the Ohio Blue Cross Blue Shield, the Kentucky Blue Cross Blue Shield, and the Indiana. And we were merged on paper. The cultures were different. Some of the people liked each other. Some of the people didn't like each other. And in the technology organization, morale was pretty low. On an ongoing basis, every year we took an employee satisfaction survey. The company wanted to be on the Great Places to Work list. I can tell you right now, as the head of technology, I was keeping them far away from the Great Places to Work list. Our scores were so low, I'm surprised they even registered. And we used to roll them out and share them with all our associates at these quarterly meetings we had when we stood up and had an all-hands meeting. And my senior team would do a song and dance about, here are our scores, and here's what we're going to do to make it better, and blah, 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 blah. There was one meeting in Indiana where a woman on our team stood up and said, yeah, this is all great, but who's really accountable? Who is really going to make sure that satisfaction improves and that we do all these initiatives that you say we're going to do? And you could have heard a pin drop. And let me tell you, I wanted to crawl under a chair at that point, and it probably would have been safer if I had. So, I had to stand up and say, I'm accountable. Your satisfaction is important to me. It's a company value. It's important to me. And if it hasn't improved significantly in a year from now, you'll have my resignation. Now, I probably didn't have to add in the last part of you'll have my resignation, but at that point, I felt that seriously about it. I do remember going home and telling my husband that night, I think I just fired myself. But let me tell you, every single day, from that point on, employee satisfaction was at the top of my list. I remember people saying to me, you walk down the hall and you don't make eye contact with me. You're just too arrogant to even acknowledge us. Well, what they didn't know is I'm basically a shy person if I don't know you, and I don't make eye contact. But it has nothing to do with arrogance. It's the exact opposite. So it took me hugely out of my comfort zone to look everybody in the eye and wish them a good morning or a good afternoon, ask about their family, ask about the work they were doing. And the rewards were immense. But I used to shake. I used to hate to walk down the hall for fear that I would have to talk to people. And that's a horrible reality on my part. But the benefits of walking the talk and communicating the values, it's just everybody started engaging together and making it a better place to work. The other example of that is, again at Anthem, different time, when we were acquiring lots of other companies. Mergers were just happening at a very rapid rate as we were buying up different Blues plans. And we were talking about who would have what jobs, where would data centers go, network centers go in the technology arena, where would customer service be in ops. Everything was a moving target. And the reality was employees didn't feel like senior managers were being honest or weren't sharing enough information. Now, for those of you who work in a public company or in a public realm, know that there's a whole lot that you can't share. It's just illegal. You'll go to jail. And so we had to have those conversations. I remember having to share with not only my senior team, but associates at all levels and managers at all levels that I do know a lot more than I can share. So here's the deal. You can ask me anything you want, and I'll answer you truthfully when I can, or I'll say, I know the answer, but I can't tell you. Or, I don't know, let me go find out. And once we had some of those conversations, it was a very respectful environment. People wouldn't ask me when they knew that stuff was going on because they didn't want to put me in that situation. If it was really bothering them, they'd ask and we'd talk it through and I'd tell them what I could. But again, it created a very healthy environment. But that's what we're talking about when we talk about walk the talk. It sounds easier than it really is. And accountability links right in with it. It's not only walking the talk, but then holding yourself accountable and supporting the values. When Anthem and WellPoint merged together, they were two very different companies in terms of culture. Just really had different values, had different ways of approaching things, and had different ways of rewarding people. And so there was a huge initiative about how do we join our values together? How do we truly become one company? And how do we respect one another and hold each other accountable for getting the job done? One of the things that we learned was how to call people out nicely. Call them out, but do it in a respectful manner. So as I was pulling together an operations team of customer service and looking at outsourcing things and who would head these initiatives, I one time had the chief actuary say to me, you did a really good job with pulling the customer service side of things together, Jane. But you'd be a whole lot more effective if you would have fired Susie Smith, because she believes in X, Y, and Z, and you're trying to protect your people. Now, it sounds like a little nit, but the fact that a peer would call you out that way and not make you be defensive immediately, although you still get a little defensive, but not get defensive immediately and you can have a conversation, is a huge thing for a company to achieve. That's what helps reinforce the values. Because again, if it happens at the senior levels, it'll happen at mid-management levels, and it'll happen at the front line. And that's a message saying it's okay. You don't target and hurt people, but you have a grown-up conversation about accountability. And we do have our future webinars. We're going to talk more about trust and accountability on the next two. So follow up on those if you want to hear more, because those are big, big topics, as you can imagine. I could just talk about them all day long, although I'm not sure that you'd want to listen to me talk all day long. So how do you sustain your values? It's really about walking the talk and walking the talk and really walking the talk. In order to make sure that the values aren't a fad or short-lived or idea of the day or flavor of the month, you need to keep it up. It's easy to keep it up in the beginning when it's exciting and everybody's talking about it, but as time goes on, it can get tedious. And we slip up. We're human. We make mistakes. But you have to pick it back up and get back on track and live by your values. And by doing this as senior managers, you give other people permission to not be perfect, excuse me, but to not be perfect, to slip, but then for them to get up and try again. If values aren't adhered to all the time, they won't be taken seriously. We, one of the things that we were measured on as a technology organization at Anthem were our efficiency costs, our cost per desktop per employee, our cost per network per employee. And they were our ongoing metrics. The reasons why we were so focused on cost and cost containment, again, all went back to keeping premiums as low as you can go, decrease admin expense, so that you're passing on less increases to the consumers. We had one senior manager who traveled quite a bit and had a laptop, but decided that he needed a laptop. And our policy was if you had a laptop, that laptop went everywhere with you, that you only had a laptop. You didn't need to have a desktop and a laptop. But this manager decided that he should have a desktop in a couple of his offices because he traveled, and a couple of laptops. So he really didn't have to bring the tools with him all the time because he traveled and they were heavy and it might hurt his back. Fair statement. However, he never came to me as CIO. He went to my staff and said, just order them. Basically, I'm the senior manager, just order them. To the credit of our technology team, they escalated to me and said, we're in violation here because he wants like 3 computers when most people can only have 1. What do you want me to do? I said, nope. He doesn't get it. He has to follow the same rules. So the tech went back, had the conversation. It wasn't a pleasant conversation, called me in. So I had the conversation. And he invoked, the senior manager, said, well, I already have the approval of our CEO to do this. So you just need to do it, Jane, as CIO. Well, as you can imagine, that didn't sit very well with me. And I happen to have a very good relationship with the CEO and sit 2 doors down from him. So as I shared the story with, why did you give an exception to this senior manager when I am trying to have people be consistent and adhere to the things that we have set are our values around cost efficiency? The CEO looked at me and said that, I never said that. I don't even know what the heck you're talking about. You do what you have to do. You honor your employees and you take care of the values of the company. That was such a powerful statement to come out of the CEO's mouth. If you think about it, he could have taken the easy road and said, just give him what he wants, get him off our back. But he didn't. He said, no, do what you need to do and know that you've got my full support. And that's what we talk about sustaining the values, that sometimes it's easier to just brush it aside and not deal with it on the little things. But people notice. And my tech team noticed that we said no to him. And let me tell you, if that didn't empower them and make them want to do an even better job, we all rise to the occasion and all have a healthier organization when we're on the same page doing things that way. Values should also be part of ongoing performance discussion with employees at all levels. There should be systems in place for highlighting when somebody does a great job, when you catch them doing something right, tell them, give them a card, acknowledge them publicly, call them out. Anytime that you can reward good modeling, it just reinforces those behaviors. I used to work at a company called Harvard Community Health Plan in Boston many years ago. And we had this one physician who was the original medical director, Dr. Joe Dorsey. And everybody loved Dr. Dorsey because he was a fabulous internist, volunteered all throughout the community, giving them his time and energy, really helped promote healthcare access in the poor communities, was a leader in immunizations. The list goes on and on and on. If you Google him, you'll find a ton of good things about him. But the company decided to come up with an award that they called the Dorsey Award. And it went to 3 employees every year who were following in the footsteps of Joe Dorsey, and who were doing all these supposedly wonderful things. And so people could nominate, it will go up. And actually, Dr. Dorsey got the final say in who could have this statue in his honor. I was very fortunate in that I had that privilege fairly early in my career that I was awarded the Dorsey Award. I was working in quality improvement and quality healthcare. And I have to tell you, that statue that I got receiving that still sits on my desk in my home office here. And it reminds me that doing the right thing isn't always the easy thing, but it pays off and people notice. It just keeps reinforcing doing the right thing and doing the good things over and over. So as we start to talk about, or finish talking about values in this session, there are a lot of really, really good tools out in the marketplace, and probably some right on your bookshelves or on your computer that you may just have forgotten that you have. Ken Blanchard does a really nice job of writing about managing by values. He takes the complex and he does a nice job simplifying it. And if you have never read any of his things, I would highly encourage it. They're very, very quick reads. And I will pick up any number of his books every couple of months and just flip right through them, because again, it's common sense, but sometimes we just need that reminder of here's what that means. If you're starting from mission statement and values and really starting to get your company to get their head around it, The Fifth Discipline by Peter Senge is a really good workbook. There's the workbook, and then there's the book to read on that, about why it makes a difference and how everything links together, and why building the foundation layer at a time in an iterative process is so important. And then I know many people have read Jim Collins' Good to Great. That, again, the BHAG goals and that whole concept, they all tie in. If you've got the right mission statement and the right values, the rest can happen more easily because you have such a solid foundation. Now, we haven't touched upon personal values at all and how they play within the workforce. Here at CoreTech, we have partnered with Tailored Protocols, and we work with them on the Core Values Index, which you can see on our website, and which are, we've got links throughout our website and some of the messages we have posted on LinkedIn. And so there's a shallow, that is the wrong word, a less deep or a high level index that you can take to get a sense of who you are and what drives you. Or you can do a deep dive one and work with us. We will work with you individually to get more in depth. And the reason why I bring that up is, as leaders, you may want to do that and get a sense of who you are, and then work on your team and see how you balance your team out with the right perspectives and the right people surrounding you and working with each other. The tool will help you with your employees, and it will help create a dynamic team. Michelle, did you want to add in here?
Yeah, so I just wanted to take a moment to thank Jane for the wonderful webinar, and to thank everyone for attending, and to remind you that now we have talked about aligning your goals and your values. And the next week's webinar, we're going to talk about how your goals and your values have a big impact in the trust within your organization and within your team, how those things can either build trust or break trust, and what you might need to do as a leader within your organization to regain trust within your team to start to build a bigger and stronger team. So if you have not already, please make sure you sign up for next week's webinar. And we will also be sending out a survey for you to take so you can give your feedback on today's webinar. It's only 6 short questions, so if you have a minute, we would really appreciate you taking that survey for us. And at this time, if anybody has any questions, I will unmute everyone so that you have an opportunity to ask any questions that you might have. If you don't feel comfortable speaking up in this larger group, please feel free to send either Jane or myself an email, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have offline as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, thank you so much for attending. Jane, you did a wonderful job as always, and we look forward to sharing with you guys all again next week. Have a great rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.